The 1920s was the bee's knees. It was the birth of mass culture, the jazz age, and the modern woman.
This decade was a time of peace. The war was over, leaving industry, culture, and economy to boom.
If you came to the Roaring Twenties, you'd be able to witness this swell time in the history of the world. Now let us explain to you just how ducky the time really was while putting on the Ritz.
This time was influential on the way society is structured today. After the war, people had extra time and extra dough, and they spent all this jack on refrigerators, radios, washing machines, ready-to-wear clothes, and bootleg liquor.
Sure, we may have had the 18th Amendment that banned the production and distribution of alcoholic beverages, but that just gave us some nifty clubs called speakeasies. Here, mobsters such as the infamous Al Capone made their living off the thrill of getting an
The
edge.
jazz scene thrived with its fast beats, earthy rhythms, and improvisational style. The blues and hillbilly music also began to prosper. Songs like Crazy Blues by Mamie Smith and St. Louis Blues by Louis Armstrong also resonated with the people of this era. It symbolized the age of liberation, expressing the velocity of speakeasies, the racial tension in the air, and the new roles women took on.
Who wouldn't want to experience firsthand this electric shift in culture?
On August 18th, 1920, the 19th Amendment was passed giving women equal voting rights. This was the first of many adaptations done to the roles of dames in society.
Boomers were the epitome of the ritzy lifestyle. Short skirts and even shorter hair, these boyish women defied the set standards of femininity. Feminism took on a whole new precedent in the world, and I know that I would have loved to be a part of this constant fight for equality.
The fashion was outrageously swanky, with dropped waistlines, curveless features. In October 1926, the quintessential little black dress was introduced by Coco Chanel, and it is still a staple in modern fashion. Women strive for a thin, straight figure, while men achieve the iconic Charlie Chaplin look.
Speaking of Charlie Chaplin, the silent film comedian, movies became a big, dark part of the American life. Hollywood started releasing 700 cinemas per year, and America had conquered 95% of the British market and 70% of the French. Participate in the popularity of the film, which increased due to the glamour, sophistication, and sex appeal of new genres and stars.
Observe how movies influenced pop culture, creating ideal behaviors and speech mimicked worldwide. Some sought out movies at the time were The Kid, The Jazz Singer, Don Juan, and Metropolis. Be there to see The Sheiks and Shebas of film. Rudolph Valentino, Anna Mae Wong, Clara Bow, and Buster Keaton.
Furthermore, Broadway flourished. Plays like Shuffle Along and Showboat featured black as well as white casts.
Another trendy aspect of the 1920s was radio. It blunted regional differences and imposed similar lifestyles. This truly emphasized the birth of mass culture, creating heroes, villains, and celebrities, with everyone developing distinct and indistinguishable tastes. Music spread through the waves, with phonograph sales skyrocketing.
One of the most famous magazines of all time, Time magazine, was published in 1923.
Practically the entire decade can be represented by The Great Gatsby, a copacetic book that is still read nearly a century later. Characters like Winnie the Pooh and Mickey Mouse also made their first appearances in the 20s. If you come to this decade, you'll be able to see the history of pop culture in the making.
Another fun activity for recreation in the 20s was sports. Spectator sports were huge, with professional football, baseball, and boxing being favored. The Yankee Stadium was built in 1927, and the tickets were only $1. Go back and see the very first game played here. In 1924, the Summer Olympics were held in Paris, where America won 3 gold medals and 1 bronze.
Athletes such as Babe Ruth and Jack Dempsey had a surge in popularity. Babe Ruth even had a candy bar named after him in the 1920s.
With the mass production of the refrigerators, people started buying perishable food in bulk. People also bought processed food, which was introduced during the
Foods
war.
included Wonder Bread, Yoo-Hoo chocolate drink, Reese's peanut butter cups, popsicles, Kool-Aid, and Velveeta cheese.
These delectable treats, along with the commercially well-liked cocoa. Condiments introduced by immigrants were especially sought after.
The gas stove granted Americans the access to simple cooking at home.
20s were an imminent time for U.S. population and city growth. At this time, there were 106,021,537 residents living in the U.S., with 29.9 people every square mile.
This is only 15% more people than the last decade's count. At this time in America, there were only 48 states, since Alaska and Hawaii weren't added yet. The most populated city in America was New York City, with 5,620,048.
3 presidents in the 1920s, all of them were Republican. The first one, Warren G. Harding, died in 1923, only 2.5 years after he was elected. His job was then taken over by Calvin Coolidge, who served for the rest of his term, but he was then re-elected because he was so well liked. The third president was Herbert Hoover, who was the last Republican of the reign.
If you're beefing about how there's nothing to do, stop your baloney and consider the following. Since wages went up 30% and work time lessened, there was way more time to vacation.
80% of the programs on radios were musical shows or comedy sketches. One of the most popular shows of the 20s was Amos and Andy.
Americans' attendance at the movies escalated as 3/4 of the population went to the movie theaters every week.
Also, thanks to the new high income, many Americans were able to travel, not just the rich ones. Middle-class families could even afford automobiles. The invention and production of the Ford Model T made transportation accessible.
These cars were being sold from $300 to $900. These cars were so popular that Ford claimed to be making one car every 10 seconds. By 1929, 23 million cars were roaming the streets of America.
One of the many spectators who watched as the fad of flagpole sitting overtook the nation. Strange activity was common amongst men, although there were some women who participated, and these competitions would last for days. The amateur standard was 10 days, 10 hours, 10 minutes, and 10 seconds.
The whoopee included mahjong and dance marathons. Mahjong tournaments became increasingly widespread, particularly as women abandoned quilting bees in favor of the game. Dances like the Charleston, Foxtrot, and Lindy Hop surpassed the traditional joint scene. Endurance contests were held to see who could perform these the longest, many even lasting months. You should enjoy these marathons and take notice of how challenging yet fun they were.
One of these flyboys was Charles Lindbergh, also known as the Lone Eagle, the first pilot to cross the Atlantic Ocean in 1927. This took him 33.5 hours. This gained him national status, as many were in awe of this astonishing feat. View the sensation that overwhelmed the world and began the time of flight.
The Roaring Twenties had plenty of inventions that were the berries. Penicillin was a change to the medical world and was used to treat various infections. The first U.S. radio station was introduced on October 27th, 1920 in Pittsburgh and was called KDKA.
The Band-Aid was introduced by Earl Dickinson in 1923 and is revolutionary to how we handle cuts and scrapes today. Traffic signals came out in 1923 by Garrett Morgan and are pivotal in how our world functions today.
The instant camera originated in 1923. We still use this to this day. Who doesn't love TV? It was launched in 1925 and has affected our lives since.
The best thing since sliced bread wouldn't have been possible without the bread slicer in 1927. Music was also shaken up by the initiation of the jukebox in 1927.
With all certainty, frozen food has restructured how Americans and everyone around the world eats.
Do you have the heebie-jeebies with enthusiasm yet? This decade was one of the most exhilarating and eventful of all.
Everyone else can pipe down because where else can you get Eskimo pie, drive-in theaters, the jazz age Republican presidents, and was just overall the cat's pajamas.
We have fun slang, fun fashion, and fun food. With our thriving economy and cheap resources, everything was as easy as can be.
What else could you want?